darle la bienvenida al segundo día de seminario. Como ustedes bien saben, la temática que abordaremos hoy será el verde urbano, infraestructura verde. Empezaremos con la ponencia del profesor Neyler, enfocada en el diseño de drenajes sostenibles, diseños urbanos sostenibles, y pasaremos después a... Vale, vale. Buenas. Y posteriormente tendremos la presentación por parte de la estudiante Paulina y la estudiante Laura, enfocada al cambio climático y espacios verdes en Alemania. La filosofía, pues, o digámoslo así, la metodología será la misma. Tendremos presentaciones de 45 minutos con 15 minutos de preguntas y posteriormente pasaremos a una introducción de la salida de campo. Listo. Vale. Entonces, en ese sentido, empezamos con la presentación del profesor Neyler. Vale. Muchas gracias, profesor. ¿Tienes el pasador? Gracias.
Buenos días. I have prepared my presentation in English. Do you feel comfortable in Spanish or English will be better? Okay. For the bachelor in Colombia, I hope you understand as well. So welcome to my presentation. Welcome to Colombia. Welcome to Medellin. I hope you are enjoying my city. I hope this is not so hard to wake up this early in the morning and starting 20 minutes later. I know how time works in Germany, so I'm sorry for that. My presentation today, as Professor Rivero said, is about sustainable urban drainage systems in urban areas. So this is kind of the work I do here in my city and neighborhood towns. I have chosen today one case study close to the University of Antioquia in the east part of Antioquia. It's nearby where you landed in the airport. And let's see how it goes. Yeah. So this is overview of what we are going to cover today. Let's start talking about the motivation of the study, the objectives, methodology. I am going to present some modeling results, the scenarios that we tested, and finally some conclusions. I will base my presentation in one case study, and I will show you briefly, if time allows, another two case studies we are currently working on. So let's start with this. Let's see. So the motivation starts with these three questions. Why we need to talk about flooding, not only in the Colombian context, but worldwide. I want to show you why we selected these case studies in particular, and then why we need to move forward the disaster risk assessment through sustainable urban drainage systems. So I think these kind of images are nowadays everywhere in the media. So this is like the world context. This is like Pakistan. This is Vietnam, Thailand, Bangladesh. But this is not a developing world problem. You are facing this every year, the 2021 floods in Germany. I was finishing my PhD in the Netherlands at that time. So it was like, okay, I'm finishing the PhD in floods, and this is happening in the border between Germany and the Netherlands. This is South Africa. And in the local context, we are seeing these images every day more frequent. we have been facing like 3-4 months of dry period, no rain at all. And rain started like, I don't know, 1 week ago, and now we are already facing floods. The images that you see here, this is Medellin. We have these underground passes on the streets that are currently flooding. And we talk about that later as a case study. We see cars, we see the under sewer drainage system with a lack of water capacity overflowing the streets, blocking roads. Let's think about the impacts of this. Let's think this is an ambulance with someone that is dying. So the impacts of the flooding goes beyond what we can imagine, not only infrastructure, human lives, hours of our economy. And we are start normalizing the problem. This is in Cali, Colombia. But images like this we see everywhere in the world. And let's stop and think what is the kind of water that these people is swimming in. Most likely, this water is polluted with sewer water. Let's think about the infrastructure. What happened with the furniture, with the electricity of that house? Let's think you need to evacuate to a hospital in these kind of scenarios. It's kind of impossible, right? This calls like Medellin innovation. So in the city that we call like the most, I don't know, innovative city in the country is getting flooding every time we face a not that extreme rainfall. This is Bogota, our capital. This is Barranquilla, that is very famous for this kind of, we call it arroyos, like urban streams. They appear in manner of minutes. They have been causing deaths and damaged property. And we see this every rainy season. I hope this works. ¿Me haces un favor? Los videos. Let's start with this one. So we have in primero este. In Medellin, we suffer something that maybe in Germany you don't suffer, and it's the floods that are occurring in the high steep slopes. So we don't need much water depth. The depth there is only about 10, 15 centimeters, and it's carrying away everything. So how to control this kind of floods? And this is in a, let's say, not that well economic part of the city. Siguiente. But it's happening everywhere in the city. So this is in a more, let's call it, well-developed economically speaking. So it doesn't matter where you build, you will be facing floods. Poneme este, por favor. But this water that is flowing from the upper part of the mountains gets into the flat parts, causing this kind of problems. Ponme este, Javier. And this is a combination of what we are building on top of our cities, but also a lack of capacity of the underground system that we have built. So we can see here on the manholes, the water overflowing. And this happens every time it rains. And again, I repeat, not a very extreme rainfall. This particular case, in this part, there is an underground stream. So it's not even a sewer system. And we cover it completely. And it dates back 50, 60 years back. So the lack of urban planning is also exacerbating the urban flood problem. And I want to finish this motivation with this video. And in this particular one, I want to show you another problem that we face in Colombia and developing countries that maybe you don't face in Germany. Is where we are building our houses. So we are not planning the territory. So I will wait a little bit. You see the house is completely flooded. You see what is the problem? Too much rain. You may think that, but in this particular case, there is an extra problem. We are building our houses next to the river. So we are not building with enough space from the stream. Again, this is a combination of several problems: more rainfall, poor planning. So my question here to you, and I don't have the answer, by the way, to all these questions that we are going to show you here. Do you think these floods or disasters are happening more and more? Why? And we can start thinking, maybe it's because we have more social media or news coverage. We are more exposed to what is happening. Was this happening before, but we were not aware of it? Maybe. Is it the urban expansion, planified or not properly planified? I think maybe. The more we build the urban spaces, the more impermeable surfaces we have. The more impermeable, more surface runoff. So where is that water going? To the streets and to the sewers. And if the sewers don't have the capacity of the streams, then we see more and more floods. Is it climate change? It's one of the topics of the seminar, right? I don't know if you believe in it. I do believe in climate change, and we are living it. The rainfalls are becoming more extreme and more frequent. Places that were not flooded before are getting flooded now. So the distribution of masses of energy and water is changing. Is it human behavior? We build where we don't need or we are not supposed to build. Maybe we are taking actions in the wrong direction. Or maybe we are doing something wrong in the disaster risk assessment or the strategies we have to deal with in this new paradigm. So based on these questions, I will show you why we are working on this topic. So I think for everyone is clear. I hope that these images are more frequent. Floods everywhere. Human behavior. I think that's Germany, by the way. I didn't choose it. I always use that one. But we are normalizing living with floods. And to that extent, that's good if we adapt. For instance, the Netherlands has a plan called Living with Nature, Room for the River. But we planned infrastructure to live with floods, but not in this way. So this also creating a more disaster situation. But when we see the numbers of deaths and damages related to natural disaster, the ones that are related with water, those are the blue and this kind of blue, account for more than 60%. So that's what I choose to work with water, because I think it's the more disastrous one in terms of both human lives and economic losses. I was missing one here. And why in urban areas? As you may know, in 2020, more than half of the world population is now living in urban areas. So maybe the flooding is the same, but we have more people exposed. So that's why I choose to work in urban areas, because when we work with floods, we can also work in large scale flooding. But I think if we work in urban areas, we have a bigger impact in terms of the number of people we are helping. Maybe I don't know, naive. So this is the first case study. So this is the Department of Antioquia. This is the municipality of Rio Negro. And this is the case study that is called Porvenir. The airport is somewhere here. So you have a reference where we are working. This image is from 2022. You can see the urban sprawl growing. And this is part of the Antioquia has been developing exponentially over the last 2-3 decades. So I wanna, first of all, flooding every time. So when you see the news, you can see that that part of the city and others are getting flooded in every single rain, dating back from 2011, and in 2021, 10 years later, the same problems, or worse. So we are not doing anything to prevent this from happening. This is how the municipality has been growing. You can see in 2023, it was around 255 hectares, and dating back to 2008, not even half. So in a time span of 15 years, it doubled the size of the city. And this is happening all over the region. So imagine you grow this big, but you don't build an infrastructure to cover that extra water coming from more surface runoff. So that only exacerbates the problem. And that's why we are still seeing floods. Plus, climate change. So it's raining more frequent, more intense. So this is one of the guys that we are needed to cover right now when we talk about urban drainage and floods. What is going to happen? These images come from the IPCC. This is the online tool they have to see what is happening. This is a precipitation variable, and we are located somewhere here. The more blue you see, the more expected is it to increase the frequency and intensity of floods, rainfall, sorry. So you see that Colombia in general is expecting more and more water, at least in this part of the country. Maybe not here, maybe not in the Amazon, but in the part that we are working or located right now, we are expecting with high probability more intense rainfall. So we need to account the cities of the future for what is going to happen to the climate, even though it's uncertain. If we don't plan accounting for climate change, any solution that we build in the environment will not be enough. This is the kind of infrastructure we have there. The problem in Colombia with information is that these networks were built more than 50 years ago, and nobody knows where they are, what kind of infrastructure we have underground. So if we don't know what is below, then we also cannot react. So the first step that we need to do in Colombia is to investigate. And this is not an easy task, and this is not a cheap task. And sometimes we don't have enough resources, enough money, or not even willing to go and see what is there. And when we did the survey, field survey, we found things like this. In normal operation, this is only sewer water. It's not raining at the moment. It's already collapsed because it was built 50 years ago. So what to do with this kind of problems? So if we put the urbanization and land use land cover changes, plus climate change, plus that aging infrastructure, we are going only to see and face more and more floodings. Based on that, we ask ourselves, okay, what to do? This is the kind of flooding we are dealing there. These images and videos are around this part of the city. This is a very flat area, high water table, poor infiltration, poor sewer systems. That's the video of the flooded area. So we wanted to propose how to reduce that problem of flooding, but not in the conventional way, not going and just putting pipes, bigger and bigger pipes. We wanted to evaluate if nature-based solutions in the form of sustainable urban drainage systems can work mitigating this impact of this flooding. I will not read that, but basically what we did is that we built the model, the hydraulic model, and we built 1D in pipes and canals and a 2D, what happens with the water when it goes on the streets model. And then we test some potential sites to locate these sustainable urban drainage system suits. And we see if we can manage to reduce or not the problem of flooding in the area. So basically, I'm going with, okay with the time. This is how our network looks like. We have here another problem is that our sewer system is most likely combined. So the same pipe is used to transport sewer water, but also the rainwater. So think what happened when that water goes to the streets and when we see these guys swimming in that water. And we found that in Rio Negro. And not only there, everywhere we go in Colombia, we have that problem. I don't know how is it in Germany, but here that is a really, really big issue. We have to manage to get a really high resolution digital elevation model. This is really important to take a proper decisions. Imagine when the water goes to the streets and you cannot represent it very properly with the surface. So you don't know where the water is going to go really if you don't have a really detailed one. In Colombia, this is not easy task to have. It's very expensive and not everybody is willing to pay for that. Fortunately, we have the utility company there that is also the one that works in Medellin, has a very detailed one. It was 75 centimeters by 75 centimeters. So we properly managed to represent the streets. That is the one that channel the water that is flowing on the surface. We also did a classification of land use. This is how the municipality looks in a raster format with 7 classes. You see their roads, you see their buildings, you see their trees, grass. With this, we wanted to know how impermeable the surface was to evaluate the potentiality of how much water of the rain will become runoff. We did this with 3 satellite images from Google. That's very, like the way that we need to do it because also the satellite images here are very expensive. So we try to lower the cost and we managed to get a really decent approximation of the urban surface. This work was expanded later and I'm not showing it to you today, but we managed also to build simulation model based on a cellular automata to project how the city will look in 25 years. So we did a simulation. It's a software called Dinâmica Ego from Brazil. And with 2 or 3 images that we get from Google Earth, we managed to simulate how the city will expand in 25 years. And if you know how the city will look like in 25 years, maybe you can plan the infrastructure for that future. And then we build the models, 1D, 2D. This is how the 2D model looks like. You see a lot of triangles. These are the kind of results we have. And then we tested our models. Locally, when we were walking the study area, we found some videos of previous floods. So people show us where the water elevation were, because unfortunately, we don't have many measurements on our systems. So if you want to know if these models are working properly, you need measurements. Okay, my model says the water in this place will be 20 centimeters. But if I don't have enough information to prove it, to calibrate my model, I just have a very beautiful model. But I don't know if it's giving me the right answer or not. So the way that we calibrated was with these videos that we collected from the people. I remember those videos that were there. So we walked the streets and we managed to ask people to tell us how deep was the water in a specific place. So the calibration that we did with our models were testing that our model give us the right kind of elevation in certain points that we measure. So we were very confident that our model was simulating the rainfall runoff part of the event. And then we start testing for climate change. Okay, what happens if the rain is not this one, but 20% more that is coming from climate change? And this is the kind of results we have. You can see here, if you see it red, this is manholes that are overflowing. This is for the actual simulation, and this is for the future one with climate change. You start seeing a more critical situation. You can see more flooding in this upper part. You can see that here that part is not flooded. So climate change is getting an impact on our simulations. This is how the study area looks now. This is how it looks in the future. And you see that the water is in almost double in both cases scenarios. So what to do with more water? We put bigger pipes? Maybe. That can be a solution. But we ask ourselves, is that sustainable in time? So we are going to start getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That needs to stop. For instance, I will use the case I know a lot is the Netherlands, the dikes. So they say, okay, let's go bigger, bigger. And one point in time, they say, this cannot be sustainable. Let's build with nature. And that's where sustainable urban drainage comes around. So this is the question I'm asking. Shall we put a bigger pipe? And if more water comes, a bigger one? Maybe they will take the whole street. Is that economically speaking feasible? I think it's not. Or dikes, shall we increase the dike if the water is going up? And if the water continues going up, shall we build a bigger dike? And in that area, we have dikes, by the way. There is a Rio Negro River that is there. This is image that is there. So the answer worldwide is no, stop. Let's start building with nature. And that's what we want to test here. We want to take the future scenario, what happened with climate change, blah, 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 but including sustainable urban drainage systems. So what we did is that we test this kind of solutions. Here you see a bioretention cell. I don't know if you are familiar with this kind of concepts, but what this do is that it collects the water from the streets, and it has a 3-layer approach. It has soil, and it has storage. That storage can be gravel, or that storage can be this kind of solution that is plastic, that acts like a water retention tank. This is one of the many suits that are available. We test different approximations, different parts, and we tested in the upper part because the model, if you remember the previous slides, were showing that the water was showing here. So this, I think I didn't that correctly in the DTM. This part of the city is flat and then goes up. And that upper part is the one that is now getting constructed. Very huge building towers. So they are changing the upper part that is permeable to very impermeable parts. And that's what is getting a lot of water. So we start testing, okay, what happened if we put this kind of solution in this upper part? And this is the kind of results we are having. So this is the scenario without suits, and this is the scenario with suits. You can see many more red here, indicating flooding manholes, but this is better to see in 2D. So this is the peak flood. We are getting a reduction of 27% with this kind of topologies that we tested in this case study. This is how the system looks like. We managed to control the flood in this area. That was our main objective. Not all, as you can see, this part continues to be flooding. So we need to put more this type of solutions. But as you can see, not all the flooding was managed to be reduced or avoided. So that also leads us to some kind of conclusion that I will show you later. Okay. I will stop this case study for a while, and I will show you very briefly two other case studies. So this is very famous in Colombia too. This is here in Medellin. It's called a system river that is called La Picacha, and is famous for the flooding on the underground roads that crosses the city. So this is the kind of problems. These kind of underground systems get flooded every time it rains. Unfortunately, some people have died there. They get trapped in the car, they cannot go out. And it was less than a year ago, we have 2 deaths there. I always joke with this with my Colombian students. I say, we normalize death here in Colombia. I'm sorry to say that. So 2 people dead maybe is not that critical in the Colombian context, but I know that only 1 life will matter. We need to take actions. Then we investigate their network because nobody knows where their system is. So we need to do a lot of work there. So this is the kind of problems we are facing. We found something very interesting that few people knew because this is very old systems. And in this video that I showed you at the beginning with the overflow manholes, there is this stream. So we cover a complete river system in the city, and nobody knows they live next to a river that has a road on top. And on top of that, this is a university that is called UPV. That stream goes next to it, and naturally it flows through the university. But when they build the university, they deviate, giving an angle of 180 to that stream. So imagine you are water, you are going straight, and then you need to go the other way around. What happened with you? You back water. And that's why we see these kind of things here. So poor urban planning. Somebody said it's better to have a university, let's take out the stream. So let's stop a little bit and think all the type of situations of the decisions that we do in urban planning will affect you later. So this was a really poor decision back in the 50s. Then we build a land use map. Then you see what is permeable, what is impermeable. And then we build a 2D model. And this is one message that I want to give you. If you want to understand urban flooding, you need to do 2D modeling. You need to know where the water is going to go in the streets. And that is only possible if you do the 2D model on the surface. And that's very computational demanding. It's not an easy task, but it's needed. This is the type of problems we have there. This is their network. This is in 1D, 2D. And if you see this type of results in your model, that means that you are getting water on the street. So we wanted to test, okay, this is the flooding, is happening here. Can we apply the same principle? Can we put some suits there? The answer was, let's try it. And we are getting a reduction not that big. I will go back to this conclusion later. It does something you cannot deny, but it's not enough if we want to prevent flooding. And I will go back later to that. And yesterday, I know that you were being told about the project called Parques del Río Norte, right? I was working on that project too, but I was in charge of the hydraulic part. I'm sorry, I didn't translate those. It says hydraulic modeling, 1D, 2D, urban drainage, river, streams and sustainable urban drainage. And what we did here, it was the same. We modeled 1D, 2D of the system. This is the catchment. This is the kind of rainfall we are getting there. This is the kind of hydrograph we get from the river. We include climate change, and we include urbanization expansion. So the project also model how the city will grow and how that will impact the urban drainage and the streams and river. With that in mind, this is how the system works. The more red, the worse it is. Actual situation, future situation. ¿Me pones ese video, Javier? So you can see here how the system is overflowing. This is the profile of these kind of networks. This is how it looks in 2D. In 2D, we managed to see how much water will stay on the surface for a case study, actual and future. This includes climate change and urban expansion. And if you see, there are some flood parts that remains on the case study. So what to do with that water? Shall we put it in a pipe and throw it to the river or the streams? Maybe. But again, we wanted to test if we can put that water. So this is the same simulation in 2D. You will see the water going to the streets and getting accumulated in the lower part. So it is very steep in the upper part, and then coming back to the river is very flat. And in the end, we get this flooding extension. So we managed to account for how much water we have in excess. So this is the water that we wanted to see. We can put it in a sustainable urban drainage system. And the answer was yes. So we built a model of the park. This is how the Parques del Norte looks like in a model. And we put there some of these solution. So we test bioretention cell, rain gardens, rain barrels. What to do with that water? We put some of them in the areas to collect them. And we test different alternatives. And finally, this is the kind of the product we developed. So for each one of the catchments, we said which solution is needed and what is the technical specifications of that solution to mitigate that excess water that we are seeing from our models. Finally, some conclusions. The problems that we are facing in flooding comes from several sources. Climate change, you cannot deny it. Urban expansion, you have to plan for it. Aging infrastructure, and many more. You can say that this invites us to new ways of thinking. Worldwide, there is a shift in the paradigm. In Colombia, we are still thinking that the solution is the pipe, is the dike. We need to change that, and you, young people, is the one that needs to start doing that change. Let's start putting suits, nature-based solutions into our cities. Let's build more green, is the final message there. We need to build models to take decisions. You need to know how much water you have and where. So we need to see where the water is coming from. Not what it is showing. These kind of models allow you to take decisions where it's happening. And for instance, in the first case study, we see that the flooding is coming because we are building impermeable surfaces on top. But the flooding is happening in the bottom part of the catchment. So what we do upstreams will affect what's happening below. Okay, to solve this problem, we need to start changing the infrastructure and taking care of the upper part of the stream. Urban planning, key element. So you guys, urban, Ingeniería Urbana, yes. You play a really vital role in our society today. And there is a lot of work there to do. We need to start incorporating nature-based solutions, sustainable urban drainage system. But one key message here, if this goes, suits are not enough. No matter how much you put on green on a surface that is already built, you cannot decrease the surface runoff to the initial levels. So you need to do a really smart combination of green infrastructure suits with gray infrastructure. So you also need to account for what is the normal way of dealing with floods. That's rivers, that's dikes, that's pipes. The good combination of two is the one that is going to really solve the problem of flooding in our cities. But let's start thinking green, please. And I think that's the last one. Muchas gracias. I think I'm okay with the time. Any question? Preguntas? You?
Yeah. Do you have the possibility to flood the landscape before the city of Medellin? I mean, do you have, yeah, yeah, I think that was the question.
Yes and no. I think you are going to walk around the city. And that's a topic I should have included, actually. Remember that flood that the house is getting flooded and they build next to the stream? That happens everywhere. And it's a very high, steep part of the city. So it's really difficult to build there any kind of these green solutions. The ideal situation will be to take these people out, but that's impossible. We need to face the reality that, let's say, you go with the authority to try to take them out. That part of the city maybe is not controlled fully by local authorities. There are a lot of underground powers that actually are building illegal houses, developing land without the proper land use. So I think in Medellin that will not be a feasible solution. And not politically, but not economically. It will be really difficult. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think that will be ideal, but not possible. Any other question?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Just one question about the modelation. What climate change scenarios do you do you use for the simulations? Sorry. What climate change scenarios did you use for the simulations?
So it depends the project. So in Rio Negro, at the time that we were doing it, we didn't have enough SSP scenarios to test. That's the latest IPCC report. So we used the previous report, that's the assessment report 5, with the RCP scenarios, and we tested on the worst case scenario that at that time is RCP 8.5. But for the Parques del Río Norte, we use SSP scenarios. We use 8.5 scenario, but not only to 2060 year. So we didn't project it to 100 years, but to 60 years. That was a discussion in the working group. Paola Arias, maybe you know that she works with the IPCC. She was leading that component, and that's the best science they can offer for us. That's the more possible scenario for Medellin or the area. SSP 8.5 at 2060. Any other question? you are shy today. Okay, thank you so much for your attention and enjoy Medellin. Have fun with the next presentations. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, profesor. Muchas gracias, profesor Neiler. Continuamos con la presentación de Paulina y Laura sobre cambio climático y espacios verdes en Alemania. Yes, the lines. Okay.
Thank you. So, hola and welcome to today's input Green in Urban Areas. So, I am Laura and by my side is Paulina. And urban green spaces are very important for the quality of life in cities. So, they not only improve the environment, but also provide places for reaction and social interactions. So, let's start with our outline. At the side, you can see our poster a little bit bigger than there you can see it. And at first, we will talk about current problems, then some facts, figures, and data on the urban greenery, followed by some strategies and vision for the future. And at the end, we will present our best practice example. So let's start with some current problems.
After a day in Medellin, I just want to give you a small disclaimer before our input, because I think in German cities, we fight with different problems on a different level. We have a high density and degree of asphalt ceiling. So we are fighting for every square meter of green and a space with high quality in the city. In addition to that, we have many historical centers we are really proud of, but there's so limited space. And also in the 1970s, there was also a very car-focused approach to planning that paid a little attention to green spaces and places to spend time in the green. As a result, I would say when planning urban green in Germany, we sometimes think on a different level to urban planning green in Colombia, especially maybe Medellin. But to give you an overview, one major problem is the increased pressure to use or overuse existing green spaces. As a result, there are conflicting objectives. In other words, I would say that the different planning sectors are faced with projects that are sometimes incompatible with each other. To give you an example, yesterday, maybe you remember that we talked about the German sustainability strategy, where the German government set the goal of reducing the amount of land use that is used for new settlements or transportation infrastructure to less than 30 hectares per day by 2030. In this respect, it would make sense to densify inner city areas instead of building on previous natural space at the periphery of the city. But this conflicts by the planning objective of preserving, if possible, expanding inner city green spaces. In addition to that, the urban green is exposed to numerous urban stress factors that can cause chronic damage to plants. For example, you can see here a meadow in the summer of Berlin, which is dried out completely after the urban stress of heat and emissions that limit the ecosystem performances. Another problem is the unequal distribution of green space in inner city neighborhoods. Often it is that poorer sections of the population live in neighborhoods with low rents. And in these neighborhoods, there's usually a less high quality green space and at the same time a higher level of pollution, meaning that the residents are disadvantaged. As you can see here in the picture, there are living many people in the high buildings, but there are only some limited green spaces. And I would say that it's not with high quality where you want to spend a lot of time, because there's only parking and just a way to go and not spend time. The last thing I want to mention is the Leipzig Charter. This is a guiding document of urban planning in Europe of 2020. And urban green is one of the 3 important dimensions of the city in this guiding planning document. And is seen as the basis of healthy living environment. Accordingly, it is essential to preserve urban green spaces and adapt them to current challenges.
Yeah, next, some facts, figures, and data. So this part in the presentation will show key numbers and facts about the green space in German cities. At first, green space offer many ecological benefits. The first one are the air quality improvement. So plants take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. The second one are the temperature regulation. So plants evaporate water, which cools the air, which was called evaporation cooling. And the third one is the wildlife habitat. So green spaces provide homes for various animal species, increasing biodiversity in the city. So how green are Germany's cities? On the left hand of the presentation, you can see Erfurt. So, and on the right side, you can see Rostock. Erfurt has a total area of 270 square kilometer and 230 people live in the city. So, and in Rostock, it is much smaller than Erfurt at 181,000 square kilometer, but roughly the same number of inhabitants. And this graphic shows agriculture land, water, forest, and buildings, and they also show green urban spaces. Zoomed in, as you can see on the next slide here, you can clearly see both cities have urban green, but Rostock has a little bit higher percent than Erfurt. Erfurt has 53% and Rostock has 78%. Examples like Hamburg, Dortmund, and Stuttgart show how green cities affect the population. So Hamburg is the greenest million-plus city in Germany and has 540 square kilometers of green space with a population of 1,076,062. Yeah, this is about 310 square kilometers of green space per person. The second one is Dortmund and the third one Stuttgart. And Berlin, as you can see on the next slide. Yeah. So Cologne and Berlin. Berlin is on the 8th place and Cologne on the 9th place. And you can see in the figures how green spaces and recreational areas, as you can see there, or another one here. A 2016 analysis based on Landsat satellite data shows that German cities are greener than probably true. This has positive effects on the urban climate and of quality life. So the list includes recreational areas, green roofs, private gardens, city trees, and green courtyards. But in Germany, we have also some negative examples, like the Hambacher Forst case. The Hambacher Forst is a wooden area in northern Westphalia. You can see it on this map where it's located. And has become a symbol of resistance to the extraction of brown coal. Since the 1970s, the forest has been gradually cleared for the Hambach open cast mine to make way for coal mining. So this led to massive protests by environmental activists who occupied the forest area and tried to prevent the clearances. So in 2018, the conflict escalated when the police began to remove the occupiers. The dispute over Hambacher Forest highlights the tension between economic interests and environmental and climate protection, and is a negative example of how serious ecological and social conflicts can be triggered by economic interest. And you can see how big this area is. It's a this one is a soccer field, and you can see how big the Hambacher Forest coal mine is. Yeah, then let's start with some strategies.
Exactly. I want to present 4 relevant strategies that can be adopted to combat all these different problems. At first, I've chosen the example of expanding the area of green spaces. To the same, existing green spaces must be preserved and brownfields revitalized or converted. At the same time, effective watering systems should be installed so that the greenery has better local conditions. Furthermore, new sealing should be kept to a minimum in line with the 30-hectare goal. To give you another example, this is Hamburg, a World War II building. And since July of this year, this whole building has greenery on top and is even accessible by foot. So that's not only an attraction for tourists, but also a new urban green space for the neighborhood. Another example is guerrilla gardening. You can see here a typical street in German neighborhoods where people put some seeds next to the trees, so it's more than only a meadow between the trees. Guerrilla gardening developed out of political protests and takes place in public spaces, mainly in large cities or on public green spaces. But at the meantime, the protest has more evolved into urban gardening. To come to the next example, I want to present multi-coding. This is an interesting idea because here the different and multi-dimensional interests and demands for open spaces are to be taken into account. Diverse overlapping usage are fulfilled in this concept. This concerns social, ecological, economic, and technical functions in parallel. For example, it's important with the technique to urban green can also be used to save water, as we saw in the last presentation. Also in Germany, it's raining more and more. And in another presentation, we will hear about water. But in urban green spaces, there are also potentials to save water on time, like in the concepts of a sponge city. Maybe you heard about it. But another example of multi-coding is urban gardening. Here you can see an example of Offenburg, where people put planters in urban green spaces to produce also food. So it's a high quality green space because people can meet, interact, and this is a high social potential, but also it's a productive space because food can be produced on a small scale. Thirdly, we should promote the quality of urban greenery for strong resilience by choosing adapted plants and a high level of biodiversity. It is possible to act in a way that is adapted to the climate change by choosing newly planted plants, for example, that they have characteristics like resistance to drought and heat, and also pests, to reduce the stress reactions, like I showed you on the first picture, and and changes that negatively affect an ecosystem service. For example, in Germany, it's common to use more and more plants that are normally from the south of Europe because they are used to the heat and the lack of rain and water. Last but not least, it is essential to make formal and informal determinations. To this purpose, informal guidelines and concepts of cities are developed or updated, which concerns planning at different administrative levels and issues of the environment. On the picture, you can see a strategy from Erfurt, which contains informations about the green in Erfurt and the projects they made via an international gardening exhibition, I would say. It's called Bundesgartenschau. Also, formal and legally binding regulations can be used in land use planning, for example, to define areas as green spaces and keep them free from construction. Also, it is important to save big trees on the streets because they have a higher ecological function, and also like parks in the city to save them from construction. Finally, it's also important to make a closer cooperation between all the different political levels and sectors in order to take advantage of the potential we have. This is also mine. The next point is I want to present you some future visions. We've been chosen for 3 I want to present. The first is the City of Nature, where the focus is on biodiversity and resilience, and the whole city is viewed as ecosystem. And this concept, for example, near natural plants are combined with spontaneous vegetation to achieve a high level of biodiversity. As a result, there's a greater stability and of natural habitats. Like shown on this picture, there are not only the permanent trees, but also greenery growing spontaneously and is not taken down. Concept 2 is the city of citizens, where the focus is on participation and shared well-being through education, encouragement, and community activities. The aim is to increase people's self-motivation to develop urban green. That sounds very complicated, but to give you an example, here we have a kind of tree adoption. There's no direct translation, but in this example of a city in close to Erfurt, they adopted a tree, this family. This was a present for this little girl, I would say. and so she is now responsible her whole life to take care of this tree. So maybe the family goes there together to water the tree, so they get a feeling and to be responsible for urban green and also take care. The last concept is the eatable city. The focus here is on production, education, and participation. I already talked about urban gardening. Here, food production takes place on a small scale, and also the quality of urban spaces gets higher by all the increased social interaction. And this is a picture from a local company in Erfurt. And on the next slide, I also have a video from an area which was used for traffic. And yeah, there you can see a lack of trees and plants. It's only a few, and this is the before. And in the after view, you can see how she created all the planting areas, bigger trees, and on the ground she's producing vegetables. She sells directly in the city. That. And now Laura is presenting our best practice example.
So at least I want to introduce you to an impressive example of urban green and sustainable city development, the Emscher Landscape Park in the Ruhr area of Germany. So some background and history: the Emscher Landscape Park is a part of the International Building Exhibition Emscher Park, which is called IBA, which was carried about between 1989 and 1999. And the goal of the IBA was to revitalize the Ruhr area, which was heavily influenced by industry in an ecological, economic, and social way. So the Ruhr area, once the heart of Germany's heavy industry, suffered from severe environment problems, economic decline, and low quality of life. The Emscher Landscape Park was created as one of the key projects to tackle these challenges and promote sustainable development. The Emscher Landscape Park is covered 457 square kilometers and includes a variety of green spaces, parks, forests, rural landscapes, and former industrial sites. So here you can see at these figures how big the Emscher Landscape Park is and where it is located. The planning and implementation followed several key principles. So the first one is the renaturation of the Emscher. The Emscher was a long and open sewer. As part of the project, a comprehensive renaturation program was started to return the river. This includes creating new river landscapes and wetlands. You can also see it in this figure. So this is the Diginghauser Bach before, and you can see it after the project. So it's also a renaturation, not of the Emscher, but of the Diginghauser Bach. The second one is the integration of industry culture. So former industrial sites were not demolished, but integrated into the landscapes. So examples include the Duisburg Nord Landscape Park and the Nordstern Park in Gelsenkirchen. Also, you can see the Landscape Park Duisburg Nord before, and you can see it after the Emscher Landscape Park project. The third one is the ecological networking. The park was designed to create ecological corridors to connect different green spaces. This promotes biodiversity and provides habitats for a variety of plants and animals. And the fourth one is recreation and leisure. So the Emscher Landscape Park offers numerous recreational opportunities, so including cycling and hiking paths, playgrounds, sport facility, and culture events. So this improves the quality of the life for the residents. There are the Amscher Park landscape has many positive impacts on rural area. For the first one, the environmental improvements, then some social effects, economical benefits, and cultural significance. So all in all, the Amscher Landscape Park is an outstanding example of how truthful and how sustainable urban planning can improve the environment, enhance quality of life, and drive economic growth. So it shows that it's possible to transform former industrial areas into green, livable, and future-oriented urban landscapes.
So the last part is our discussion, and we hope today you're more active. So we brought you some pictures of Erfurt to give you an expression. Here you can see a central place where all the traffic is coming together. Here you can see the view from a big church. Also here the market is taking place. This is a typical living area, neighborhood in the city center. And this is more in the periphery with some higher buildings. So our question would be, after seeing the impressions of Erfurt, how do you feel about the greenery of a German city? And maybe what differences are there to Medellin or maybe another Colombian city you are coming from or you know? Who wants to start? You give the microphone to the students or should we? Yes.
Say to everybody the questions. Yes, the questions.
Yeah, that everybody can answer too.
Yes. Okay. Sí, buenas.
Hi. When you show us the slide of the greenery, do you remember that slide? Do you think that it can be considered also as a green area, knowing that it's still a building? Or do you think that it requires a new category when we are like, I don't know, like defining a map of the green spaces of a city?
Can you repeat it? I think it's about the
greenery.
question about the beginning, which Laura like this.
In the strategies. Right there. In
This example?
Yeah. Do you think that that's like it can be considered as a green space, knowing that it's just still a building, or
I consider this as a green space, not because of the plants on the side. This has just a positive effect, but it's a green space because here you can go directly on top, and there was a kind of park built. So there's a meadow and big trees, and you can spend time on the rooftop, but it doesn't feel like a rooftop. It's more like a tiny park. So this is for us a kind of green space and a strategy which transformed a historical building into a high quality green space.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, back to our questions. Maybe somebody wants to answer also the discussion question, or just give examples of Medellin We are not the experts for here, but what we saw already impressed us.
Very shy today. Impressive presentation. Thank you so much for that. It's really nice to see this kind of green solutions, and I think it inspires us in Colombia to start thinking our cities like that. I have to say, to answer your question, that Medellin is one of the greenest cities in Colombia. And that comes with a big question mark, because the percentages of green in our cities is not well distributed. So it comes and is directly related with how much money you have. So the neighborhoods that has a higher income are the greener ones. But then you go to the Parque del Río Norte, and there you have only like 12% of green spaces. And we have areas of less than 4% covered by green and public spaces. And you are inside the University of Antioquia, one of the greenest places in the city. But you go next to the station, and it's completely a park that is built in concrete. Yeah. So we are not planning for a green city yet. And we need to appoint for that. And I think we need to start looking into how Europe is managing it. And this is a way to inspire us. And the question remains how to, and I will give you back the question. How can you go to those, let's call, low-income neighborhoods where you don't have any green space and turn it into more green? How to promote that from, I don't know, political incentives, how to promote it from the local government to create these more green spaces, taking into consideration that they build where they are not supposed to build, they don't have the economic resources. You cannot put those green roofs because normally those houses doesn't have a proper construction system, so they will collapse. So I don't know, inspires to face the challenge in these low-income areas that we are facing the problem with green infrastructure.
Thank you.
So I think the first one, some formal things. So there are a lot of informal, but some laws or some other things give more structure. Yeah, this was the first thing.
Maybe in addition to that, it would be attractive to give people money if they put some green around their house. For example, maybe it's possible to make a rooftop gardening or some kind of green, so that it's attractive for people to get in self-activated actions to plant green. But yeah, I see the point that that's really a challenge to get more green in the poorer sections and maybe also the informal districts.
Bueno, yo voy a hablar un poco en español, más fácil. Es que yo quería hablar un poco sobre mi experiencia en el Perú. Allí estaba trabajando y allí hay muchos asentamientos informales, ¿no? Pero hay leyes y para que sea legalizado uno de dichos asentamientos hay que cumplir que sea un certain porcentaje por zonas verdes. Y la gente sabe eso. Entonces, la gente misma cuando hace una inversión, hace caso que se mantiene unos espacios verdes, porque solamente así puede ser en el futuro legalizado. Y eso, bueno, no siempre funciona, pero en muchos casos sí. No sé si aquí también existe estas leyes para que sea formalizado, debe ser un cierto porcentaje de zonas verdes.
No, por ahora no. Lo que sí es que se aumenta la plusvalía de, en este caso, los establecimientos, incluso viviendas que están cerca de las zonas verdes. Pero no, no existe un marco normativo, así que defina, pues, incluso el porcentaje de zonas verdes como si se determinan los indicadores, en este caso, de sostenibilidad urbana, ¿no? Particularmente, por ejemplo, Barcelona maneja un 20% de superficies verdes en relación a la superficie construida. Incluso hay una relación también con el número de habitantes en relación a la superficie verde, incluso la proximidad que se debe dar a esas superficies verdes.
Muchísimas gracias. Yo también voy a seguir en español. Yo también tuve la misma charla con el profesor Salazar ayer. Y creo que eso no es un tema de solo, por ejemplo, las áreas verdes, que ese sector informal, cómo podemos incluir o cómo podemos aplicar nuevas ideas europeas, por ejemplo, también en el sector informal, ¿no? Yo creo que es la parte de que la participación es muy importante, ¿no? De incluir más o menos la opinión de la gente en el primer paso, antes de, por ejemplo, ¿cómo se llama? Poner ideas innovadas, innovadores en ese sector. Pues yo creo que es un error decir, mira, eso es, por ejemplo, un plan de acción, vamos a implementarlo. Creo que es importante de hablar con la gente desde el primer paso. Es que nosotros no tenemos la experiencia con el sector informal, pero la participación, por ejemplo, en Alemania ya es muy presente también en los proyectos y creo que en Colombia tiene más valor y es más importante de usarlo también, como en un punto muy, muy avanzado.
Muchas gracias. Continuamos, ¿o está bien?
Then we thank you for your attention to this presentation, and we look forward to work on the urban green the next week.
¿Ese? Sí, ¿con cuál? Listo. Ah, sí. Sí, sí. Muchas gracias a Paulina y a Laura por la presentación. Y en esta misma línea, en esta misma temática, vamos a abordar el tema de la excursión del día de hoy. La excursión se enfoca particularmente en cómo se ha incorporado la infraestructura verde en el espacio público en Medellín. Particularmente vamos a analizar 3 proyectos que se han realizado a forma de acupuntura urbana, teniendo en cuenta, en este caso, perdón, el concepto que comentábamos el día de ayer, y es cómo se ha hecho el desarrollo de Medellín a partir del concepto de intervenciones puntuales en ciertos sitios estratégicos de la ciudad, teniendo en cuenta, por ejemplo, conceptos como la informalidad. En esta misma línea, lo que vamos a analizar el día de hoy o a estudiar, estos casos de estudio, es cómo se está incorporando esta infraestructura verde como garante de calidad urbana y también desde los temas de sostenibilidad y sociabilidad en la peatonalización de varias vías. Analizaremos lo que es la calle Junín y la calle Carabobo. Y también tendremos presente cómo se ha hecho una revalorización de aquel comercio informal que se ha desarrollado en el centro de Medellín. Posteriormente, el análisis que realizaremos será en el proyecto de Parques del Río. Ustedes ayer estuvieron en el proyecto de Parques del Río del Norte y este es el proyecto de Parques del Río, particularmente del centro. Es un proyecto muy interesante porque incluso se ha hecho una transferencia de experiencia que se ha vivido en Medellín, en la M30, perdón, en Madrid, en la M30, en España, teniendo presente pues la incorporación de esta infraestructura verde en el espacio público. Asimismo, como les comentaba el día de ayer, Nosotros tenemos una influencia, pues, de un urbanismo norteamericano, un urbanismo, pues, expansivo, ¿no? Urban sprawl, y también, digamos así, una influencia de un urbanismo compacto venido, en este caso, de Europa. Pero particularmente en Medellín, pues, se han visto también unas transferencias de experiencia a partir de otros gobiernos o de otras instancias, como ha sido en el caso de Japón, de un urbanismo social y de un urbanismo compacto, particularmente desde España. Estas implicaciones en el desarrollo urbano han llevado a volver a revalorar lo que es la escala del peatón. Y en esa revalorización, pues se ha tenido en cuenta esa infraestructura verde. Entonces, en esta línea, pues el día de hoy analizaremos estos tres proyectos a forma de acupuntura urbana, donde ya se está, en este caso, incorporando la infraestructura verde, no solamente de la parte de sostenibilidad, sino también desde el urbanismo social. ¿Vale? Entonces, ahora lo que haremos es un breve descanso, ¿no? Take a break. Y después nos veremos en el punto de encuentro, the meeting point, ¿no? Dentro de 15 minutos. Listo. Gracias. Bueno, hasta ahora que estén bien.
Termino la transmisión. Sí.